I think the key messages are that first and foremost, the business community is ready to lead alongside governments in making the transition to a low carbon economy a reality. They see multiple benefits from this transition. First and foremost, they recognize that climate change is a risk to their operations, to their supply chain, to the inputs into production, and also, of course, critically to their consumers and their markets. And they want to manage that risk appropriately through climate action. They also see activities and interventions to promote low carbon development as being profitable for them in terms of cost savings. They see it as being beneficial in terms of driving innovation in goods, in services, in technologies, in processes, for example. And they see an increasing demand coming their way from investors and from their consumers to be part of this low carbon transition. They see it as being beneficial to their reputation, beneficial to their brands. So they're very, very keen to lead alongside with governments. The second point is that they need support and incentives from governments in order to take that leadership action. And that means, for example, de-risking investments in renewable energy, for example. It means putting in place a regulatory environment that puts the right types of policy incentives in place for low carbon development and low carbon interventions. It means, first and foremost, having policy certainty, because the types of investments business need to make are over a long term, and they need to know that if they embark down the pathway to low carbon development, that this is a path that is going to be consistently supported by governments over time. More than anything else, they need a price on carbon, because that is the surest way of internalizing all of the costs of this transition and making sure that the financial incentives are in place to make low carbon investments as opposed to high carbon investments. So the We Mean Business Coalition is a new platform featuring 7 business-facing networks that brings together organizations working with literally thousands of the world's leading companies. And these are companies operating across geographies and across multiple industrial sectors. And our main purpose is to, first of all, change the narrative on climate change from one that stresses sacrifice and risk to one that talks about the opportunities of a low carbon transition. Second of all, to provide a voice on behalf of business that helps to shape a policy enabling environment on low carbon development at the international level through this UNFCCC process, but also domestically in key economies. And thirdly, to provide an opportunity for businesses to collaborate with each other, to work together, to put in place the types of solutions that enable them to balance profitability with also contributing to a low carbon future. I think there's a number of ways in which the private sector can be involved. The first way is to consult the private sector and involve them as participants in shaping the new international agreement. I think this needs to be more than just a diplomatic agreement between countries. It needs to be a catalytic signal to the marketplace, because that's the only way in which we're really going to develop the innovations, the technology, but also generate the scale of finance that's going to be needed for low carbon development. So I would suggest to governments that you involve business as a key stakeholder partner in crafting this Paris Agreement. The second way in which the business sector can be included in this process is incentivize business to actually lead on climate compatible development. And that means making sure that the policies are in place that will supplement public finance on climate with private sector finance coming from investors, coming from pension funds, coming through corporate procurement. And also, going back to what I said earlier, it really does mean putting in place a price on carbon so that those incentives for low carbon investments are really translated into language that the marketplace understands. The one other thing that I would say is that businesses are not only actors in their own right in terms of reducing their own emissions, but they also enable other sectors of the economy to reduce emissions. If you look, for example, at the ICT sector, they're the people that make the analytics available to other parts of society to measure, to monitor emissions, and to consequently reduce emissions. And people like the financial services sector, they're the people who make the types of financial products available that help on insurance, that generate the green bonds that fuel the transition to a low carbon future. So I think understanding that the business community is not just a source of emissions, but that they're also enablers of low carbon development is really important. I think the main challenge that I've seen coming from my own background, which is largely in government myself and public policy, is that the world of politics and the world of business have not traditionally spoken the same language. and as a consequence they tend not to communicate with each other very often. As a consequence of that, you see that this is a process that is driven mostly by diplomats, and there are other processes and other venues where business people gather to talk about the climate issue. And we really need to do a better job of bringing these two communities together and giving them a language through which they can communicate together. So for example, I think this process would be greatly strengthened if there were more people here who did understand how business works, how finance moves around the world, how corporate procurement decisions are made, how supply chains operate. If you had that type of expertise in here, I think it would lend itself to more success in the process. And similarly, there needs to be more understanding of the politics of climate change within the business world. There needs to be greater understanding that through this process, nearly 200 governments are committing to a decarbonisation, and they are committing to domestic policies, domestic laws and incentives that will affect businesses operating around the world. So I think the main imperative is to get these two communities to speak together in a language they both understand, because I think that is the secret to progress. Well, within the We Mean Business Coalition, we have put together a campaign, and this consists of more than 20 different collaborative initiatives looking at different aspects of the climate challenge. So we have collaborative initiatives dealing with renewable energy, dealing with energy efficiency, looking at short-lived climate pollutants, issues such as methane and black carbon, looking at deforestation, looking at adaptation and resilience building as well. And one of the signature parts of this campaign is led by our friends in the climate group, and this is called RE100, which means Renewable Energies 100. And essentially what they're doing is working with businesses to commit to 100% renewable energies. And so far, more than 20 businesses have signed up to go fully 100% renewable over different timescales. The hope and expectation is that 100 companies will sign up to this initiative before the end of 2015, really as a stimulus going into Paris, and that collectively, if that target of 100 companies is reached, that could generate somewhere in the region of 200,000 megawatt hours of renewable energy electricity. And to put that into context, that's around the same scale as a country like Iran. So if those types of companies begin to go renewable, and if they meet that target, I think that will not only be a major contribution to the Paris process, but it will also demonstrate to companies right around the world that opting for renewable energies is compatible with climate goals, but it's also compatible with cost savings and being profitable.